Hi, I'm Reverend Jim Harden. This is Proof of Life. Follow me on all your favorite podcast platforms, as well as my Newsmax column, Harden's Hard Truths. Last Friday, something happened at the Alabama Supreme Court that could eliminate abortion all across America forever. This is an extremely important moment because what happened was the Supreme Court of Alabama sided with parents who essentially created through a reproductive, in vitro fertilization clinic embryos of their children. And these embryos were mishandled and dropped and destroyed. And so these parents filed a wrongful death suit for these children against the clinic and the hospital, I think. And this was the lower court ruled in favor of the IVF clinic against the parents. The parents appealed, went to the Alabama Supreme Court eventually, and the Alabama Supreme Court ruled in favor of the parents, saying, in fact, these preborn human embryos were children with constitutional rights, constitutional right to life, and required equal protection under the law according to the 14th Amendment, etc. This is a big deal. This is huge. This is bigger than the Supreme Court's potential decision on chemical abortion. They're going to hear oral arguments on March 26th regarding the FDA's illegal approval of chemical abortion. That could, overturning Roe versus Wade a year ago, June 24th, was big. But it didn't outlaw abortion. It just sent it back to the states to decide for themselves how to regulate abortion. Now the Supreme Court's thinking, well, let's just think about this FDA case about chemical abortion. Chemical abortion represents nearly 60% of all abortions in America. The FDA illegally approved it, circumventing their own protocols. Now the Supreme Court is asked to pick it up because it was lower courts gave mixed decisions about it, and the FDA, I think needs to follow their protocols, and I believe that the reason the Supreme Court picked up the case is because they have an appetite to protect women and babies from abortion too. So that case, if outlawing mifepristone, the chemical abortion drug, would cut abortion at least in half overnight in America. But this particular case, if it's appealed, could go to the Supreme Court, and if the Supreme Court would pick up this case, they would essentially want to weigh in on the personhood status of preborn boys and girls. And that was the crux of the case when abortion was first legalized in America in 1973 with Roe versus Wade. The crux of the case, according to the majority opinion author Henry Blackman, was all about personhood. If it can be established that a preborn boy or girl, an unborn child, they say, is a person, qualified person under the Constitution, and then abortion must be outlawed. And so the majority opinion in Roe versus Wade, written by Henry Blackman, said, quote, "The word person does not apply to the unborn." Now you've got Alabama Supreme Court saying the preborn child is a child without exception. It doesn't matter how far along they are. It doesn't matter the developmental stage. It doesn't matter their physical location. It doesn't matter what any ancillary characteristics are, whether their heart's beating or whether they can feel pain. It doesn't matter. This is a fully human person, a unique individual, beginning at the moment of fertilization. Now, we've been saying this for years. A unique human individual, according to science, begins the moment the female gamete and the male gamete unite and create a unique DNA strand that manages that unique individual's maturation process from that moment on through death, natural death. And so that unique individual is a fully and equally human. And to make arbitrary decisions about when that individual becomes a fully fledged human with all the rights due to it according to the Constitution is, like I said, purely arbitrary and, quite frankly, capricious. I mean, do we want to continue to allow our government or representatives or bureaucrats or scientists to make arbitrary determinations about which humans qualify for personhood status and protection and which ones don't? So let me just back up real quick and talk about what IVF is. In vitro fertilization, I believe, is unethical. Now, a lot of people might say, well, I have a grandchild that was the product of an in vitro fertilization, and I have whatever. Look, we're all sons of Adam and daughters of Eve. We're all sinners. We're all fallen. We're all born into sin. I'm not saying that your son or daughter is bad. I'm just saying that the process of in vitro fertilization is unethical. The fact that we're creating human embryos with a third party, sometimes we're bringing in eggs from an egg donor. Sometimes we're bringing in sperm from a sperm donor. Sometimes we're bringing in, but we're always bringing in a third party in reproductive health technology between the man and the wife. Okay, and from a biblical perspective, you can certainly see how there is an adulteration of the relationship going on when you add a third party donor for a fertility kind of gamete, like an egg or a sperm. But you also see it in, when you bring in, the medical community, fertility, doctors or whatever, they become, third party elements to the husband-wife relationship in order to create a human life, as if human life were some sort of product, some sort of consumer product that we can create and treat like a machine. Now, the way in which IVF works is, a woman will there'll be some egg harvesting going on, and there's a process for harvesting eggs. She gets injections and she ovulates, and they go in and they harvest these eggs out of that are going through the fallopian tube. The doctors take the eggs and they take the sperm from the sperm donor, whether it's the father or somebody else, and they fertilize the egg or these eggs, and they get multiple embryos from this. And by multiple, I mean tens, 20s, or hundreds. And then these at this point are fully fledged, unique individual human beings at that point. But that's not where it stops. They don't just send them to the freezer. They determine their fitness. They screen them, and then they cull them. CULL. They cull the number of embryos based on certain characteristics. Now, culling is a fancy way of saying, and you never hear this in the news, by the way, but culling is a fancy way of saying they destroy certain embryos that they don't think are fit based on certain criteria. And then the remaining, then they take some of the embryos and implant multiples of these embryos in the woman's uterus to see, if one or more of them will implant in the uterine lining and take. And the other ones they'll freeze for future. And oftentimes these embryos are frozen and they're never used. We've got hundreds of thousands of frozen embryos now in these reproductive facilities all across the country, hundreds of thousands. This is a major ethical dilemma. We are trafficking in human embryos. This is, and this is a major multi-billion-dollar business. And it's just flat wrong. To traffic in human beings in this way and to treat human beings as some sort of consumer product. Whenever parents feel like they are ready to have a child, or they want a designer child, or they got their career set and now they're 40 and they're ready to have a baby, or whatever. It just, the whole thing is just mercenary and consumeristic. It's not about parents sacrificing for their children. It's about spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to try to get the child you want, designer baby. There's obviously tragic situations where parents can't have babies for whatever reason. But why not adopt somebody else's embryo? Why not adopt somebody else's child that's already been born? Why not jump into the foster system? There's 1 million babies that are being aborted every single year in America alone, 73 million worldwide. Why are we going around trying to create embryos through this IVF multi-billion-dollar industry that is unethical? This is going to have a major impact on the IVF industry because now, if embryos are fully fledged human beings, they can't cull the embryos. They can't kill them off based on, criteria for, whether or not they're suitable, whatever criteria they use for determining fitness for implantation. It also changes the definition of, of conception, because the abortion kind of promoting medical community at the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecologists basically say that they changed the definition of conception to mean implantation in the uterine lining. So they don't believe that they're insisting that conception does not begin at fertilization, even though that's what science says. That's the reality. They wanted to make. They want to be able to claim that certain contraception types are not abortifacient. They don't abort children. But hormonal contraception is abortifacient in nature. When a woman takes a hormonal contraception, she actually creates an inhospitable uterine environment. So while the egg might be fertilized and she has a unique embryo that's floating down her fallopian tube and is looking for a place to implant in her uterus, it can't do it. And so that child is destroyed. Just like the IVF clinics destroy those embryos, so too this hormonal contraception, including, by the way, IUDs, internal uterine devices. They do the same thing. They create inhospitable uterine environments whereby the fertilized egg, the embryo, cannot implant and therefore destroys the child. This is an abortifacient. And so the ACOG, this abortion promoting, organization, masquerading as medicine, insists that you've got that conception begins at implantation. Why? Because the way in which they're trying to control fertility and population growth is through contraception, hormonal steroidal contraception, and/or IUDs that are abortifacient in nature. Now, one of the things that's taboo to talk about in the kind of evangelical Christian community, besides vaccines, by the way, don't talk about vaccines because, they're okay. Everything's good. By the way, check it out. Check out how your vaccines are created. Most of your mandatory childhood vaccinations, I'm getting off point here, but most of your mandatory childhood vaccinations are created in the manufacturing process using aborted fetal cell lines. And they don't even try to hide it anymore. They also, if they don't use aborted fetal cell lines in the manufacturing process, they do use aborted fetal cell lines in the testing process. So why did they start doing that? I have no idea. But nevertheless, they do it. It's unethical. It's time for us as a Christian community to stand up and start becoming alert and aware of how the unethical nature of abortion is affecting our daily lives. But beyond that, there is another taboo, and the other taboo in the kind of evangelical Christian community is not just talking about sex, but talking about contraception. There is more sterile sex going on in the evangelical community than anywhere else in the world. I mean, God forbid we have more than 2 or 3 kids, right? And so the evangelical community is the most sterile community in the country, not just in terms of the contraceptives that we use. Hormonal contraceptions is abortifacient in nature, and because it's abortifacient in nature, it also is known for causing all kinds of problems with women beyond obesity, but including stroke and heart attack. I mean, who? But what is it used for? I mean, you're going to give your teenage daughter hormonal contraception because she's got acne. Is the doctor going to tell you that it increases her risk of cancer or stroke or heart attack or obesity or whatever? I mean, you name it. Hey, she doesn't have pimples. Thank God for that. What? It makes me want to cuss. let's get outside of ourselves for a second and realize that God is in control of the way in which human beings are created. God should be in control. For when we start to take control of that, what happens is we're reversing the creation mandate. The creation mandate is to be fruitful and multiply and subdue the earth. God has never reversed the creation mandate. Never. Find me a verse in the Bible, would you please? Somebody from Genesis to Revelation where he reversed the creation mandate. I mean, even after Adam and Eve fell, he did not reverse the creation mandate. Instead, what we have happening in America today is the reversal of the creation mandate. Instead of being fruitful and multiplying and subduing the earth, we're saying, let the earth be fruitful and multiply and subdue ourselves because we're the disease, we're the virus. And God forbid we have more than 3 kids because we won't be able to send them all to college and make sure that they have their, 5,000 square foot house and a 3-car garage with his high paying job. There's more to life than a paycheck. And by the way, God is the one who sustains us. God is the one who protects us. God is the one who provides for us. There's a reason why Jesus said, seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and then all these things will be added unto you. What does he mean, these things? He means food, shelter, and clothes. That sounds like what we're worried about when we're looking for a paycheck. But we want more than that. As Americans, we want our designer babies, and we want our life made to order. We want to go on our vacation, and we want to have our time off, and we want to have our early retirement. We want to have our nice big 401k, and we want to do whatever we want to do. And now you've got IVF. I just can't stand IVF. I was in church one time. I'm not kidding you. I'm just going to tell it straight. I was in church one time, and somebody was up there leading worship. And he said, I've just got a testimony to tell you. And I'm paraphrasing now. But he began to tell us this testimony, how he and his wife have been trying for so long to have a baby, and they finally did. And everybody's like, fantastic, you finally had a baby. And then he began to talk about their IVF journey. Okay, this is in a Christian evangelical church, their IVF journey. And he's just, tears are coming to his eyes, and he's just saying, praise God, we finally got, a child to, and he was making jokes about a child that wanted to stick around or whatever. I don't know. It was kind of crude, but nevertheless, everybody's applauding this IVF testimony. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm surrounded by people who are unable to think through the ethical dynamics of controlling human creation or procreation in the male-female marital dynamic. It is totally outside of Christian ethical principles to think that that IVF is ethical. And now you've got some great jurisprudence coming out of Alabama basically saying, look, if you're going to do this, if you're going to play God and create all these embryos, you at least need to treat them with the dignity and respect due of a fully fledged human being. Protect them all. You can't cull them. Now, the media and the reproductive health technology fertility clinics, they're never going to tell you, and they've been very careful not to talk about their culling process. But look into it. Look into the IVF process, would you please? If you're concerned that Jim Harden has gone off the deep end, and by the way, if anybody has known me for any length of time, you can just look into stuff that I've written for years and years and years ago. We are living in a moral and ethical debris field with Christians unable to make real life, minute to minute, hour to hour decisions and interpreting and filtering the ethical dilemmas that are coming their way. They look at IVF and they don't see any problem at all. No problem at all. To get that one child to implant in the uterus using IVF, hundreds of babies likely had to be destroyed. Hundreds. Congratulations, America. Congratulations. We are killing not just 1 million babies a year in abortion. We're killing I don't know how many more by intentionally creating embryos and then intentionally destroying them. And we're calling this technology. This is technology. This is not technology. This is sending babies to elsewhere. This is the giver. This is 1984. This is everybody pretty soon is going to we're going to be walking around working for the government wearing overalls this is the new ministry of truth and love are going to be coming down on us for for speaking words that are, antithetical to the secular new morality that they're trying to create. Is there a difference between the way you think as a Christian and the way the world thinks? Is there a difference between what you do and what the world does when it comes to childbearing, child rearing, medical decision making? Because our technology is now controlling us. We're not controlling it. We're actually kind of conditioned, habitualized to not question the medical community. Someone needs to start questioning the medical community. Do a little research and see if medical schools require medical ethics classes for doctors, or if they're just electives. They can take a elective course on medical ethics if they want to. Because most of the doctors, I was talking to one of my mentors, Edmund Pellegrino at Georgetown University, several years ago, and he was lamenting over the fact that he was getting all these new medical students coming in uncatechized, untaught in the ways of what it means to be human under God. They have no idea. And so he's trying to get them to read, he was trying to get them to read, great, literature about, great sweeping epic themes about humanity and what it means to be human. And, that's all fine and good. But unless you're rooted in a higher truth, or rooted in God in particular, it's just going to be an opinion. And so what you've got in Alabama is you've got a bunch of justices that are saying, look, mankind is made in the image of God, and every human being begins at the moment of fertilization, and IVF demonstrates that. And so if you're going to do IVF, it's not for us to decide whether, this court to decide. It's up to the legislature to decide whether or not IVF should continue. But if you're going to do IVF, you got to protect all those babies, which is going to make it very, very expensive. And everybody's complaining. It's going to be very expensive to have to keep all these embryos around. I mean, we need to kill some of them, right? Because that's what they're complaining about. It's going to be too expensive. Too expensive. Well, then stop creating so many embryos and stop destroying them. And I think Christian couples need to recognize and need to do some really, really deep soul searching into the nature of adultery. What is adultery? Look up the word to adulterate. And ask yourself whether or not adultery is happening in the IVF process. When you're getting a third party involved in the oneness kind of aspect of marriage. And I think that you're getting outside of the limits of what God will bless, and certainly we have to think clearly about what it means to be human in all these categories, and thinking clearly about matters of this level of import are oftentimes uncomfortable, and sometimes downright. I mean, the conversations can get downright nasty because there's so much emotion involved. But I would encourage you, if you're serious about your walk with the Lord, you're serious about being a Christian, you're serious about your final authority being God as revealed through Scripture, do some study on the principles of what it means to be human. Do some study on the principles of what it means, what the basic unit of society is, the marriage. Do some study about what the kind of primary purpose of the marriage relationship is, to be fruitful, multiply, and subdue the earth. Do some study about the nature of the womb and how God is involved in opening and closing the womb. I mean, there are, in the history of God redeeming mankind, there were pivotal female characters that couldn't have babies. I'm sure you all know this. There are also pivotal moments where government was coming in attempting to kill large amounts of babies. I'm sure you all know this. Moses, Jesus, all the rest. I mean, But you also have scenarios where you've got entire nations making a habit of putting their sons and daughters to the fire, sacrificing their children to unknown gods or demonic gods like Molech for the purpose of. And why would you sacrifice your child to a god? Why would you make any sacrifices to any other god? It's so that you can have something. You can have control over something. You can have greater prosperity in some ways. You can have, fill in the blank. Is there any difference in America with respect to abortion and child sacrifice? The purposes are all the same. The results are all the same. And we must be careful because we are offending a holy and righteous God who does not overlook these things. I mean, he's the one that said, anybody who causes one of these little ones of mine to stumble, it would be better for him if a heavy millstone were hung around his neck and he'd be cast into the sea forever, forgotten into oblivion. After all, this is the God who inspired the book of Leviticus, where it says, if somebody sacrifices their child to Molech, then they and their whole family will be cut off. And if you know about it and you don't do anything about it, you will suffer the same judgment just for knowing about it and not doing anything about it. You will have the same blood on your hands. There is no category of sin in the law that carried more weight than the destruction of a child and the intentional destruction of a child. Now, what if it was an accident? What if two men are fighting and they accidentally strike a woman who's pregnant and she miscarries? Accidentally. This is in the Bible, by the way. Exodus chapter 20. Eye for an eye, tooth for tooth, life for life. That's what it says. To the extent that harm befalls the child who was in the womb is the extent that will befall the person who harmed the woman that caused her to miscarry accidentally. Now, what happens if it's done on purpose? I'm telling you, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, please think with me about what it means to be human. We have an obligation to each other. We are obligated, and like these justices at the Supreme Court in Alabama recognize, we have an obligation to protect each other, to respect the dignity of of our humanity made in the image of God. That's where dignity comes from God. We are inherently valuable. Therefore, we are inviolable, not to be violated at every stage of maturity from fertilization to natural death. That's what the government must recognize, or the justice system is a farce. The justice system is just there and designed specifically to protect the interests of the powerful and the rich, the oppressor over the oppressed. It's a gimmick and a game at that point. This is serious stuff. Let's not play around with it. And so I'm what's going to happen? I think what's going to happen with the Alabama case is that the IVF clinics will not appeal because they're afraid that if they appeal, it will actually go to the Supreme Court. So they're probably going to get money. They're probably going to get money to increase their cryo freezer space and just freeze more embryos. And they'll probably do a lot more implantations. They'll probably implant 10 embryos in a uterus at a time instead of 4 or 5. I mean, all sorts of things they're going to do. They did not outlaw IVF. What they did was they were essentially saying that all the embryos created are fully fledged humans, and you must protect them. And so now they're saying that you need to increase your policies and protocols to protect these babies, or face wrongful death suits. And rightly so. But the fact that these embryos now exist because they were created in an unethical fashion does not make them less human. It makes them fully fledged humans. It's just now we've got a responsibility to protect them. I would also suggest that we encourage these reproductive health kind of IVF treatment facilities, fertility care facilities, to create adoption plans, to create adoption networks, to create adoption opportunities for couples that are able to have children, and say, hey, would start educating, start promoting the fact that we've got hundreds of thousands of embryos that are sitting frozen that need a home. Would you consider adopting an embryo? And start the process. I mean, I think there is a couple of organizations out there right now, embryo adoption organizations. One of them, I think, is called Snowflake Adoptions. But go and look into these organizations if you're interested in adopting, or if you know of somebody that's having trouble conceiving. Look into embryo adoption. That I think has less severe moral implications than the adulterating process of IVF, trying to get your own embryos created, or using somebody else, some other gamete like a sperm donor or an egg donor for your process of wrongfully creating embryos. Anyway, that's what I have to say about this emerging case. It is groundbreaking, and it's quite encouraging. We'll see if it's appealed to the higher courts. But again, I kind of doubt that it will be appealed to the higher courts, because my sense is that the Supreme Court would love nothing more than to weigh in on the nature and status of personhood, because that would cut off the debate about whether or not state or government can dictate which persons qualify for protection under the law and which ones don't. And of course, people in power want to be able to dictate who they can protect, who government should protect, and who they shouldn't protect. That's one of the reasons why pro-lifers are being treated like second-class citizens in America, because we're the ones that are able to articulate that all people, without qualification, without partiality, from the womb to the tomb, from fertilization to natural death, are fully and equally human, without any qualifications. That's the only way you're going to have a blind justice system. That's the only way you're going to have true equality in America. I'm Reverend Jim Harden. You're watching Proof of Life. Follow me on your favorite podcast platforms. Like and share and comment. For those that have complaints, feel free to send those to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. Please write them in crayon to Suite LGBTQ, zip code 00666. Thank you. God bless.